Hello everybody, and welcome to Rowan Reads, the part of the show where Rowan reads some fanfic. We are going to be reading today Harry Potter and the Natural 20, and we have moved on to Chapter 3. In Chapter 1, we met Milo, a wizard from the D&D universe who has been teleported or transported or apparated, or whatever you want to call it. He has moved through dimensions from the Dungeons & Dragons universe into the Harry Potter universe. And much against his will, I might add. And in Chapter 2, he met the Trio of Terror and have caused quite a commotion, as one is wont to do, on the train where he fought Malfoy and leveled up. So he's very excited about the fact that he has leveled up from that experience, which is interesting because apparently his leveling system is still working just fine, even though he's in the world of magic, of wand using magic users. Also, Milo met Ollivander and is thoroughly freaked out and terrified of the man. So that's kind of a pretty funny section, actually. So now on to Chapter 3 today, where we will be discussing the sorting ceremony. You're just gonna listen? That's perfectly okay, my dear. I am also very tired. It has been a week, so I'm very glad to be here with y'all. Okay, so let's get started with Chapter 3. Alright, could be raised slightly. Alright, I will raise the microphone just a little bit more. There. Oh, thank you, Sheila. I appreciate that. And the music is not too loud. It looks like it's pretty quiet on my mixer, so I think that should be fine where it is. Alright, thank you guys so much for your help in getting this all situated. I appreciate it very much. Alright. I've said alright a million times already. Let's just get started already. Chapter 3, The Sorting Ceremony. Alright. The first years all filed into the great hall apprehensively as McGonagall explained about the 4 houses. Milo mentally filed them into the house for the PCs, the house for the villains, and the 2 NPC houses to make up the numbers. Fair enough. I love Milo. The other first years around him were nervously discussing what they thought the sorting ceremony would entail. The group conclusion seemed to be that it would be some sort of horrible test, performed in front of everybody. Milo's post-level up elation hadn't passed yet, but he... Thank you. She whose name cannot be spoken has informed me that dinner is here. The other first years around here were nervously discussing what they thought the ceremony would entail. I'm just going to start over from... Okay, Milo's post-level up elation hadn't passed yet, but he still wished he hadn't burned so many spell slots on helping Neville find that toad. There was a kerfuffle as a group of ghosts drifted through the halls, but Milo was already ready for this. He shuddered to think what he would have done in this situation had he not met the late Professor Binns the other day. The students were formed into a line alphabetically by McGonagall, and once more Milo cursed his last name. Why couldn't he be in Milo Leandin Anastasia instead? The only person in front of him was a pink-faced blonde girl. What do you think I'll have to do?" she asked, the signs of abject terror on her face. "I'm first. Why am I always first?" she asked. "Don't worry, you'll be fine," Milo said. "They expect everyone to do this test, remember? So how hard could it be?" And besides, they wouldn't start out every year by humiliating all their new students. Maybe it's all just a cruel joke, and everyone will laugh at me, she thought through tears. If they do, I'll unleash magical hell on them, Milo muttered. What he meant was, if they do, That, to me, I'll unleash magical hell. But that's not what the frightened young girl heard. You would? For me? Thank you. Don't mention it, Milo said, slightly embarrassed, and cast about for some fairly generic, encouraging platitudes. You're braver than you think. Just keep that in mind and confidently walk up there, and whatever happens, happens. There's bravery in everyone. You just have to look, he finished somewhat lamely. When I call your name... Oh, this is McGonagall. When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted, McGonagall said to them. Abbott, Hannah. The girl looked determined as she walked up to the stool, and while in another life or another universe she might have been sorted into Hufflepuff, not that that's anything to be ashamed of course, perhaps it was because she was thinking, I'm braver than I think, I'm braver than I think, I'm braver than I think, I'm hungrier than I thought.
A plate of cheese, my lady.
Thank you. A plate of cheese bread and some cheese bread. I'm going to have an interesting night tonight, let me tell you. I'm braver than I think. I'm braver than I think. When the hat was placed on her head, it only took a moment before it bellowed, Gryffindor! Anastasia Leandon, Milo, McGonagall said. Well, here goes nothing. Gryffindor! The hat shouted after barely touching his head, and his new house applauded as if it wasn't already a foregone conclusion. Gryffindor was clearly the house for the main characters. To confirm his suspicions, Neville, Hermione, Ron, and Harry were all sorted into Gryffindor, although oddly the hat seemed to have a hard time deciding with Harry. Draco and his minions, however, were sent to Slytherin. Milo wondered briefly what would have happened if one of Crabbe or Goyle had been sent to Gryffindor, or perhaps even worse, Hufflepuff. Milo looked around the tables and found that, oddly, the plates and dishes were all empty. He shrugged and pulled his everlasting rations out of his utility belt and started munching. What you got there? Asked Hannah, who had, for some unimaginable reason, sat next to him at the table. On Milo's left were Hermione, followed by Ron, Harry, and Neville. Let me scroll. Thank you very much. Everlasting rations, Milo explained, gesturing to the blue silk pouch. Oh, hold on. If I'm going to be having some everlasting rations, I should have some everlasting rations. There we go. Oh. Those were tastier than I thought. Ooh, sorry. Everlasting rations, Milo explained, gesturing to the blue silk pouch. They're not very common. I heard about them in an obscure book, and I had to get them custom made, but they're super handy. Every sunrise, the bag fills itself. Thank you! At sunrise, the bag immediately refills itself. Convenient, she said somewhat dubiously. Are they tasty? I don't think anyone's ever asked that before. He thought about it for a moment. It tastes a little like granola, only even less. She made a face. You don't think we're supposed to bring a lunch, do you? They will feed us, she asked. Milo shrugged. Hermione? He asked, on the assumption that she'd know. Hermione paused briefly, as if doing a mental catalog search for the relevant information, before reciting it, as if from memory. Hogwarts is world-renowned for owning some of the best cooking elves and prides itself in never having one complaint for its dining experience. Durmstrang Academy, by comparison, has received 444 complaints as of the 1991 5th edition of this book, she said. It's Hogwarts a history. You should read it sometime. Elves? Milo asked incredulously. For cooking? Milo had never known an elf to approach within 20 feet of a frying pan, and doubted that a single solitary potato the world over had never been peeled by the delicate elven hands. Milo was convinced that they were holding out on a rare, arcane version of create food and drink, because otherwise their civilization would have crumbled to dust about 2 weeks after creation. I wish I was rich enough to own an elf, Ron said dreamily. I'd never have to clean my room again. Milo's brain heard that sentence, of course, but rejected it immediately with a notice. Does not parse. Own an elf? He must have misheard. Before he could ask, the headmaster spoke. Welcome, Dumbledore said. Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin, I would like to say a few words, and they are nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak. Thank you. And then he sat back down again. Is he a bit mad? Harry asked. Well, yeah, he's a bit of a nutter, but some people say it's a disguise, and he's really a genius, Ron said. He seemed normal when I last talked to him, Milo said. And you don't get to be Chief Warlock of the Wizardmont and Supreme Wugmonk of the International Confederation of Wizards by collecting bottle caps, Hermione said, or by being a stark raving mad, she added. Everyone looked at her again. Seriously, it was in Hogwarts of history, and honestly, don't any of you read? She asked, slightly indignantly. Quidditch magazines mainly, Ron admitted. Newspapers rescued from the trash, but only when the Dursleys aren't watching, Harry confessed. Outside of spell books and fell arcane tomes, not that much, Milo said. Hermione sighed. You should try it sometime. You might find it very enlightening. Oh my goodness! Piles and piles of food appeared suddenly in front of them. Huh, neat trick, Milo said. I knew the elves cooked their food by magic. Pointy-eared pansies never worked a day in their lives. His last sentence drew a number of odd looks, but fortunately, most people were too busy digging in to pay much attention to him. Harry, in particular, looked like he was about to cry tears of joy at the food laid out in front of him. Milo shrugged. To him, food was something to keep you from getting hunger-based check penalties. While the rest of the party was distracted by food, Milo made sure to cast Detect Poison before touching any of it. Milo decided to check out the head table. The teachers at Hogwarts were the quirkiest bunch of characters he'd seen since Milo had been hired to take out a gnome barbarian's band of performing cutthroats. One of them was wearing a purple turban. One of them was tiny. Milo couldn't tell from this distance if he was a gnome, a halfling, or a dwarf. One of them was Albus Dumbledore, for God's sakes. The last, though, now he was really interesting. Black cloak, greasy hair, hooked nose. Necromancer, hands down, Milo grinned. Ladies and gentlemen, we have our dark wizard. Milo gave it a 50% chance that the professor was working for you-know-who, with the other 50% chance that he was you-know-who. The only nail missing from his coffin was a goatee. Hey, Hermione, who's he? Milo gestured to the obviously evil wizard. That's Professor Severus Snape, born 1960, made potions master at Hogwarts in 1981 by Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, and as of 1991 is the head of House Slytherin, she recited. Hogwarts History, page 371. You're a very useful person to have around, you know that? Milo asked. Hermione beamed. Harry, listen up. Add Snape to your list. He's bad news. Are you sure? Harry asked. Absolutely. I mean, just look at him. He's wearing all black, for goodness sake. I don't mean to put too fine of a point on it, but we're all also wearing all black, Milo, Harry said, gesturing to his uniform. It's black of a different sort. We're in the sober working black. He's an evil black. Back me up on this, Ron. Fred and George say he's a smarmy git, and he favors Slytherin students outrageously, Ron said, and that's not his accent, but there you go. They also say he's half bat. He can read your mind, and that shampoo spontaneously combusts when it touches his hair. But I think they made that last one up. He's probably just allergic to shampoo, Hermione said. He's a professor. He can't be evil, or Dumbledore wouldn't let him teach here. Milo barked a laugh. They clearly had very different views of education. Harry abruptly clutched his forehead in pain. "What's wrong?" Hermione asked in concern. "I was just looking at Snape, and suddenly my scar hurt," Harry said. "The scar that you-know-who gave you?" "No, the other scar on my forehead. Of course the scar that you-know-who gave me," Harry snapped. Hermione blushed slightly. "Sorry, I don't mean to be mean. I was just so angry all of a sudden. It was weird." "I'd say that's basically proof," Milo said. Harry looked at Snape and caused his cursed scar to hurt. Ergo, Snape is evil. "Sounds good to me," Ron voiced in his agreement. "I mean, look at him. Seriously." "I don't think we should jump to conclusions like this," Hermione said. "One's fashion choice and hygiene, no matter how unfortunate, have no bearing on moral standing. Also, we should really tell an adult about Harry's scar. It might be important. He might need a healer." "What does Snape need to do? Eat a baby or something?" Milo asked. "New PCs could be so thick sometimes." "He hasn't even done anything yet," Hermione protested. "She has a point," Harry added. "All he's done is sit there. Maybe he's a really nice bloke, and I don't think any of us know enough magic yet to say that my scar's reaction means anything. We should give him the benefit of the doubt." "Fine, it's your adventure after all. But can we at least agree to keep a close eye on him?" Milo pleaded. They all agreed, albeit in Hermione's case, somewhat reluctantly. Dumbledore then stood to make another speech, laying out some ground rules. The Forbidden Forest was, yeah, right. Milo couldn't imagine a better way to encourage students to let them go there and gain XP than forbid them from doing it. Milo's ears really perked up about hearing about the forbidden, trapped, mysterious corridor, however. Harry laughed when Dumbledore said that anyone who investigated would die a painful death, but nobody else did. The headmaster was serious. Milo grinned. He loved this school already. "I can't believe that Quidditch is restricted to second years," Ron complained. "What's Quidditch?" Harry, Hermione, and Milo asked simultaneously. Ron fainted into his pudding. Once he came around, he described the rules. It was some unbelievably dangerous-sounding sport. 2 of the players' jobs were to send heavy leather balls flying at the opposing team, and it was played on a broomstick. As Ron explained about the golden snitch, Milo considered it thoughtfully. From what he could tell, the Seeker's success or failure completely invalidated everything that the other players did. It was as if the sport was entirely set up to give Seekers a backdrop to compete against. "I like it," Milo said. "It has everything. Magic, danger, rules blatantly skewed for the PCs to shine. Harry, make sure to write this down." The boy who lived dutifully added it to his growing list of plot-relevant items. "I think it sounds stupid," Hermione declared, ignoring Ron's protests, "and way too dangerous to be allowed in a school setting. Flying, in general, sounds dreadful." Dumbledore sent them all to bed, so Percy, as Gryffindor prefect, led the first years to their lair. En route, they were attacked by Peeves. "Peeves, show yourself," Percy bellowed. "He's a poltergeist. Be careful. He only answers to the Bloody Baron. That's the Slytherin's ghost." "Getting all this, Harry?" Milo asked. Peeves flew past. Blah, 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 blah. Say that 5 times fast. Peeves flew past, throwing sticks at Neville's head. "Perfect. That was an attack if I've ever seen one. Permission to retaliate." "Now, I don't think that will be necessary. He knows if he goes too far, I'll tell the Baron," Percy said. "Besides..." Percy was interrupted, however, when Peeves unloaded a bucket of water on the prefect's head. "Hit him with everything you've got, Mr. Anastasia Leandon. Everything." "Glitter dust!" Milo shouted, the shower of sparks blinding the poltergeist for 24 seconds now. Level ups are the greatest, and preventing him from turning invisible. Peeves, whirling in astonished fury, began dropping walking sticks, pies, and assorted other miscellany on the students. Featherfall, Milo cast, slowing their descent to a harmless speed. As a coup de grace, once the blindness wore off, he created a silent image of the Bloody Baron slowly drifting around the corner. Peeves bolted, leaving a trail of glittering dust in his wake. "Well done!" Percy congratulated him after using a cleaning charm to dry himself off. "Is everyone all right?" "Excellent. That was Peeves the poltergeist. If you encounter him in the halls, it's best to find a member of the faculty or the Bloody Baron. He won't deliberately hurt you, though his pranks can at times get out of hand, but he's irritating and might make you late for class. After decades of certain disrepute, Hogwarts students using Peeves as a pretext for tardiness, teachers have stopped accepting run-ins with the poltergeist as an excuse." Yeah, you can say that several times fast because you're typing it. It's so much easier when you're typing it. Milo couldn't believe they had a random encounter within the castle walls. This school was awesome. Percy led them finally to the Gryffindor common room, which was guarded by a painting requiring a password. Milo hadn't realized that inner-house rivalry was quite so heated as to require secret bases and passwords, but it fits with the general theory of Hogwarts education. Both Harry and Milo felt at home immediately upon entering Gryffindor Tower, but for different reasons. Harry was overwhelmed at all the magic and wonder and glad to finally be rid of his abusive foster parents. The sense of camaraderie in the dorm was something new and amazing to him. Milo, on the other hand, felt the calling of all wizards everywhere, regardless of universe. Wizard equals tower, tower equals wizard. He was excited for tomorrow, when he could fully enjoy the benefits of being 4th level, and memorize a whole slew of new spells. He decided, after a bit of thought, to add levitate and invisibility to his repertoire. He made sure to prepare an extra silent image in case of another run-in with Peeves. The next morning was interesting. Word had spread that the famous Harry Potter was attending school, and Milo's unfortunate friend was pestered with constant whispering and glances. Milo suggested that he borrow some makeup from Hannah, because Hermione didn't seem the type, and hide the telltale scar. The minor details only gave a +5 to disguise checks, but Harry admittedly adamantly refused, claiming that it was the only reminder he had of his parents. Ron howled with laughter at the suggestion, adding that some eyeliner, or as he put it, guyliner, would really bring out Harry's emerald eyes. Their first class was herbology, which Milo figured was safe enough. He was a bit concerned that learning about plants might mean he would be obliged to invest skill ranks in knowledge nature, or, Vecna forbid, survival. But after clarifying that it was magical herbs they were studying, Milo was quite convinced his knowledge arcana would be up to the task. History of magic was likewise no trouble at all. Milo spent the class trying to figure out what his immediate response would be when the ghost of Professor Binns inevitably snapped and started draining the students' constitution scores, or when an evil cleric showed up and seized control of the undead professor with command undead. Professor Flitwick apparently taught charms, which was a problem for Milo. As a specialized conjurer, he was obliged to drop 2 schools of magic. He chose necromancy, because he didn't look good in pale makeup and mascara, and enchantment. He was uncomfortable about mentally controlling people. The charms sub-school fell neatly into the second category of spells, which Milo was forbidden from casting. Fortunately, the excitable professor, who Milo was convinced was some form of deformed gnome, fainted dead away when he called Harry Potter's name while taking attendance. "So what have we got next?" Milo asked Ron. Let me check," the redhead said, patting his pockets for his schedule. "Transfiguration with McGonagall. I hear she's really strict." "Transfiguration, eh? That might be a problem." Yep. Oh! Hi! I don't know if you guys can hear him. Yes, Merle. Merlin, come here. Grab your pants. What is it that you want? Are you okay? Are you alright? What? Somebody wanted a hug. You okay, sweetie? We're going to try to hold you and read. Oh, or not. Or not. Okay. You want down? You want down. That's fine. You don't have to stay up here. That might be transfiguration, eh? That might be a problem, Milo frowned. That would involve, presumably, performing actual magic with a wand, something Milo hadn't even tried to do. He was worried that if he actually succeeded, he might end up as a multi-classed wizard/wizard and be doomed to spend the rest of his days as a walking joke of a character. "Why's that?" asked a first-year NPC. The other Gryffindors had started following Milo around between their classes after word spread that he could scare off Peeves. Professor McGonagall was so astonished that the entire class arrived on time, apparently that never happened before, that she awarded 5 points to Gryffindor. After then warning them of the dangers of transfiguration, she told them to try and transform a matchstick into a pin. Milo broke out in a cold sweat, staring at the stick in front of him. Surely, wizards in this plane couldn't cast polymorph any object at first level. That was an 8th level spell. Milo felt a bit foolish waving his wand around ineffectually, but he really wasn't sure what else he could do. Hermione, sitting next to him, had managed to turn her matchstick at least silver. Milo's eyes narrowed. "Prestidigitation," he murmured. It was a cantrip, a 0-level spell, used for practice by novice casters, but it was also one of the most versatile. And my personal favorite. Milo preferred to think of it as least wish. One of its many effects was that it could recolor an object temporarily. He then sat back smugly in his desk chair, satisfied with the job well done. McGonagall passed by, giving encouragement and pointers to the struggling students as she passed. Upon reaching Milo, however, she frowned and stared at his silver matchstick. To Milo, it was indistinguishable from Hermione's. McGonagall picked it up, examined it very carefully, and dropped it on the desk. It made a quiet, wooden tick. "Mr. Amastasian Liaidon," she said sternly, "did you paint your matchstick?" No, Professor," he stammered. "Drat! Curse her cross-class ranks and intimidate!" "Then bravo! 1 point for Gryffindor," she said grudgingly, before walking to Hermione. She frowned and gave hers the same examination. She dropped it, and it gave a silvery metal ping upon colliding with the desk. "Well done, Miss Granger. It's been many years since I've seen someone change anything more than mere color on the first try. 2 points to Gryffindor." Hermione turned slightly pink and shot Milo a smug look when McGonagall passed by. Next was potions, with the Slytherins no less. Whoever is involved in scheduling of classes, Milo thought, should be awarded a medal. He couldn't think of a possible scenario that would lead to greater conflict than the obviously evil head of the obviously evil house teaching the heroes and the villains together. Put a PC in a powder keg like that, and there'd be an explosion, sure as sure. Milo was the only Gryffindor smiling as they entered Snape's dungeon. Dungeon! It had been far too long since Milo had been in a proper dungeon. Now all they needed was a troll or two to complete his day. Milo didn't know what specifically was going to go down in this dungeon, but he knew someone was going to start a fight, and he knew who was going to finish it. He chose his desk warily, deciding to go right in dead center. The rest of the Gryffindors sat on the right-hand side of the classroom, leaving the left-hand side empty. A clear message for the Slytherins, whenever they designed to arrive. From the border between the two groups, Milo could safely target the entire Slytherin first years with well-placed spell on the first round of combat. There was an infrequently used rule, and Milo loved infrequently used rules, called the ready action. A character can, on his turn, ready an action to do something specific when certain triggers, which he chose in advance, occur immediately. It allowed rapid action, as long as you were prepared enough. As the Slytherins drifted in one by one, a few were covered in whitewash, mute evidence of Peeves' humorous pranks. Milo readied an action. Glitter dust in the center of the Slytherin side of the room as soon as the first Slytherin acts offensively against a Gryffindor. That should cover it. Snape walked into the room like a man with a purpose. He quickly called out attendance, pausing on Harry's name. "Ah, yes," he said softly. "Our new celebrity." Draco and his mooks sniggered. The other Gryffindors, sitting along the borderline, Neville, Hannah, and Lavender, sat tensely, their hands near their wands. Snape began his introductory monologue, lingering, a bit too lovingly for Milo's taste, on the subtle science and exact art of potion-making. "Potter," said Snape suddenly. Harry sat bolt upright, a brief look of terror on his face. "What would I get if I added powdered root of aphrodisiac to the what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood?" Milo frowned. Nothing, he thought, except of course a god-awful smell. "I don't know, sir," Harry said. "Ah, well, even wizards fail a knowledge check once in a while." "Tut-tut, fame clearly isn't everything," Snape sneered. "Well, now that's just rude." "Let's try again. Potter, where would you look if I told you to find me a Bezoar?" Hermione's hand shot into the air, as did Milo's. I don't know, sir," Potter said, his voice barely shaking at all. "Thought you wouldn't open a book before coming, eh, Potter?" "Well, now, there's no reason for him to act like that to the poor Gryffindor kid," Milo thought. In fact, the head of House Slytherin is acting rather downright offensively. Oh, crud. Glitter dust! Oops. Chapter 4. The Defense Professor. "You know, it really could have been worse," Hermione said. "Can't see how," said one of the Batali twins, the Gryffindor one, whatever her name was. "Well," said Lavender Brown, "at least the bloodshed was kept to a minimum." "And St. Mungo says Neville's supposed to make a full recovery," added Hannah Abbott. "And we weren't expelled," Hermione pointed out. "Also," continued Lavender, "Snape managed to finite that toad. Who summoned that, anyway? I don't think I've ever seen quite that shade of orange before Pansy Parkinson suffered permanent injury." "Really, it's a wonder he knew which one to cast it on. Couldn't tell the two apart myself," muttered Ron. "I think only taking 10 points off showed remarkable restraint, all things considered," Hermione mused. "Shame it was the very first in the year for Gryffindor, though. Because, seeing as how she looks like a toad," Ron said, disappointed in the initial lack of response. "Assuming we don't assault the Slytherins anymore, and we all put in a few extra hours and some hard work and practice and revisions," Hermione said cheerfully, "I think we might be able to manage to beat the Hufflepuffs at least. Not that there's anything wrong with them. They're a perfectly respectable house. In the House Cup standings." Seamus and several others, largely interchangeable first years, groaned. "Nothing a golden snitch or two won't fix," Ron said hopefully. "Wood reckons, assuming we can find a seeker half as good as Charlie was, we stand a decent chance at taking the Quidditch Cup from Slytherin this year." "Cease!" said the Bloody Baron. He didn't exactly shout, and it wasn't exactly loud. In fact, it seemed a little more than a whisper. But even over the 10 complaining 11-year-olds, and Hermione, who was in fact 12, the ghost's voice was clearly audible. "Be glad it's only house points and detention. When I still attended this school, we still used the cat o' nine tails." The Gryffindors fell silent. A few scratched their heads, pondering the Baron's last statement. Harry knew he shouldn't. He really, really knew it, but he just couldn't help himself. He had to ask, "Don't you mean you still use the cat o' nine tails?" "No, it was introduced by a weak, soft headmaster after the Emeric the Evil retired. By a Hufflepuff, as I recall," the Baron mused. Harry swallowed. If a 9-tip whip was seen as soft enough for a Hufflepuff, not that there's anything wrong with them, to use instead of whatever they did before. The entire first year of Gryffindor was in detention, overseen by the silvery-tongued ghost of Slytherin. Their task was simple enough on the surface. They had to keep the suits of armor that lined the halls of Hogwarts free of rust. The catch wasn't that they couldn't use their magic, they couldn't, of course, or even that they were supervised by the Bloody Baron. Milo couldn't help but wonder where the Bloody Baron's blood came from. It isn't because the Baron died violently, or nearly headless Nick would be at least as bad, but it was that the paintings were ordered to ignore them during detention. Oh, you might be thinking, is that all? And if so, it is because you've never been 11 years old in a shopping mall after closing time, completely alone, with only a teddy bear. Only in this case, the shopping mall has, at last count rounding up, a completely unknown number of floors, and the staircases move, as do some floors. One notable corridor appears to twist somewhere in the middle, and by the end of it you're walking on stone and there's a carpet along the ceiling, but only on every other Tuesday except on leap years, and the shopping mall is a castle, and the castle is Hogwarts. Ed, your teddy bear is missing. It only took half an hour for Hannah, Neville was still in St. Mungo's, to vanish. Okay, the thing we need to do is not panic, Hermione said calmly, and search for her in a group. As long as we stay together, we should be... Nah, that's rubbish, Ron interrupted. We're at a 4-way intersection, and there's still 9 of us. We can find her faster if we divvy up, send 2 in every direction except 1, which gets 3. Faster we find her, the faster we clean these ruddy statues. No, there's only 3 directions to go unless we go backwards, and in that case, that's besides the point. If we split up, we'll have to stop and go looking for you. What, just because you're so much smarter than all of us, Ron said rudely. For all you know, we could have to go find you. That's exactly my point, Hermione shouted. So we're in agreement. We split up. No, Milo shouted. You never split the party. Never. You're one to talk. You got us into this mess, Lavender accused. Says the girl who lit Pansy Parkinson on fire, the Patil girl muttered. That cow had it coming, Lavender said defensively. She called me a cow. We're getting sidetracked, Hermione insisted. We need to find Hannah, and the best way to do that is to It's that word again. We need to find Hannah, and the best way to do that is to systematically search every room and hallway, as a group, that she could have gotten to in 10 minutes. That could take the rest of our lives, Ron said. Let's just split up and find her already. No, I'm telling you. Fine, how about a compromise? I'll split up with Harry, Dean, and Seamus. You others stay together. Are you coming, Harry? Harry gave an apologetic look and followed Ron and the others down the corridor on the right-hand side. Hermione sighed. Okay, well, the rest of us can start off the left and work our way through. Who put you in charge anyway? Lavender asked. Pavarti, Faye, and I can take the center. We'll have found Hannah and be back to cleaning the statues while you're still organizing. Lavender strode off, followed by a pair of witches. Pavarti, Miley said. So that's her name. Hermione groaned. You know, I sometimes wish I'd been sorted into Ravenclaw, she muttered. This sort of behavior would never stand there. I don't suppose you have any other tricks up your sleeve. Loads, said Milo. But locate creature is a 4th level spell, and I can only do up to 2nd. And unless Hannah's met an unfortunate end, locate object won't be able to find her. Huh, said Hermione. So you can find objects but not living things. Yeah, that's basically what I just said. Any unique object I've seen firsthand, or the closest one of a type of object. Find her robes, commanded Hermione. Milo paused. I think that's cheating, he said. Or at least bending the rules to the point of breaking. I like it. He imagined, as best he could, Hannah's robes in his mind. Easy, because they were exactly the same as the one he and Hermione were wearing. Locate object, Hannah's robes. So where is she? Sort of between forwards and left and up a little. Now down, now up again. What? Any idea how far? No, except that she has to be within the range of the spell, which is 560 feet at the outer limit. They decided to head left, based on the fact that it seemed to have a big chance of being correct as forward if they didn't have to deal with Lavender and whoever those other 2 girls were. Wish Neville were here, Milo said. Why's that? Hermione asked as they walked. He was nice enough, for a boy, Hermione supposed, but he wasn't exactly useful. Well, see, if he were, then he'd be the one who'd wander off and get lost. Then we'd be looking for him, he explained, and not Hannah Abbott. You have a very unusual view of the world, do you know that? So tell me, she said slyly, why would you rather Hannah were here with us? Because then there'd be 3 of us, and we'd have a higher chance of making our spot checks. Our what? Our spot checks. You make them when, say, Peeves is sneaking up on you from behind, and I have a feeling we failed one. And why is that? I just get a feeling I get sometimes. Wait, Hannah's moving. The spell stopped tugging him forward and left, and abruptly started pulling more to the right, and then down, rapidly. She's falling, and depending on the distance, it might be pretty fast. We should find a professor immediately, Hermione said. She might be hurt. For once, I agree with you, but how are we going to find one? Face it, we're lost. Ah, Hermione said. There must be something we can do. What other spells do you know? Milo started listing. For an ordinary wizard of his level, there would only be about a dozen or so. But Milo was no ordinary wizard. He was an optimized wizard, and one extremely broken ability he'd traded the ability to make magical scrolls for allowed him to cast any kind of wizard divination spell. Spells for finding things, information, and people he'd heard of. He'd heard rumors that it could be used for non-wizard spells as well, but Milo was unwilling to risk it. He knew the horrible stories of what could happen to those who bent the rules too far. Suffice to say that the universe could be capricious. You can read people's minds? Hermione gasped, after Milo explained detect thoughts. You're a legitimus. First of all, that's not a word. And second of all, only surface thoughts. There's a whole bunch of restrictions on it too. Other than locate object, though, there's not much there to help us. A rather large amount of them seem to be focused on fighting, which can't be very useful. Milo chuckled slightly. Well, not today, maybe. We're completely screwed, aren't we? Unfortunately, Hermione said. She slid and slid down a wall, sitting on the cold stone floor. If only we could ask one of the portraits for help. Might I be of assistance? Asked a timid voice. Behind them stood the erratic Professor Quirrell. See? Told you we failed a spot check, Milo muttered. Professor, you have to help us, Hermione blurted out. Hannah went missing, and everyone ran off to go find her, and now we're hopelessly lost. We can't ask the portraits for help because we're in detention. She said the last 3 words slowly, as if her mouth found them strange and foreign. Milo shrugged. He'd never been in detention either, but then again, he'd never really gone to school before. Shouldn't be terribly difficult, he stammered. When I was in Romania once, but my party was separated by The blood drained from his face, and he sat down shakily. Vampires. There's vampires in this world? Milo thought worriedly. He made a note to start taking anti-vampire precautions. Garlic, holy symbols. Where's a cleric when you need one? Milo sniffed. Quirrell's turban emanated the distinct odor of garlic. Smart, Milo thought, in case they're recruiting characters and come for revenge. Hold up, Milo said. Vampires in this world, do they act like, well, normal vampires? You know, suck blood, never age, can turn other people into vampires, that sort of thing? Yes, Quirrell stammered reluctantly. He clearly didn't want to talk about vampires anymore. They don't age, Milo repeated again, so they could live forever unless they ran out of blood or someone stakes them. I suppose so, Quirrell said. His stammer was increasing in frequency. Milo, we have to find Hannah. We'll worry about vampires later, okay? Hermione said. No, this is important, he said. Hermione opened her mouth to say Hannah is important too, but Milo added, really important. Hermione frowned, but fell silent. Quirrell looked intrigued. So, we know you know who wanted to become immortal at any cost, right? Milo said. I don't know much, but it sounds like to me, like that was one of his major motivations. Yes, Quirrell said. Yes, he did ever seek eternal life. And we know that you know who didn't really die, Milo said. Hermione sighed. We don't know that, she thought. We don't even suspect it. We don't even have a shred of evidence. Do we now? Quirrell asked. Do we really? Who else knows? just us, but it's obvious to anyone with a brain. I'm sure Dumbledore knows all about it, and Harry, Hermione, Ron, and I, of course, are going to stop him. Anyways, back to the point. Becoming a vampire isn't nearly as motivational, as non-trivial as, say, some sort of secret dark ritual for eternal life that I don't even know about what. All it takes is a couple of minions and a vampire. The vampire turn you, the minions kill the original vampire, you're free. To what purpose? Quirrell asked. Immortality, of course. Eternal unlife. I think we should seriously consider the possibility that you know who is a vampire, Milo concluded. He had a really nagging feeling like he failed a skill check of some sort, but it was probably nothing. He doesn't seem the type to mind having to drink blood every so often to live. Quirrell frowned, but said nothing. We need to find Hannah, Hermione stressed. She could be in serious danger, and all the other first years are still scattered all across the castle. When last I saw the young Miss Abbott was swimming to the shore of the lake, Quirrell said, his eyes going briefly distant. Milo wondered what possible reason someone would need to use both still and silent spell on Scry. Percy, your house's prefect, was attempting to use a hovering charm to assist her. I believe she is quite well. Well, that's a relief. I wonder how she wound up there, Hermione asked. We should probably try to find all the others now, too. The test proved somewhat more difficult than they'd hoped, and even with the help of the paintings, who could, at Quirrell's request, attempt to locate the students, but not speak to them, it took the better part of the afternoon. Lavender and company had been delayed by Peeves, who managed to convince them that Hannah was just around the corner, and then around the next corner, and then the next, until they were hopelessly lost. While Ron had found himself locked in an old, unused classroom, but when he turned around the door had vanished. Harry and Seamus had gotten cornered by Filch and lectured lengthily about wandering off. They finally found Dean sitting uncomfortably in the Gryffindor common room, but he refused to say how he had gotten there. Great, Hermione said worriedly. Just great. After detention, and then hunting down our classmates without enough sense to wander off, I haven't had the chance to even touch the dark forces, a guide to self-protection, for a whole day. I've probably forgotten everything in Defense Against the Dark Arts is tomorrow. Insufferable, isn't she? Ron asked Harry, who looked uncomfortable. How many times have you read that book already, Hermione? 3, she said, and then the blood drained from her face. Oh my God, only 3. I'm not going to know anything if there's a quiz or if he asks me. I'm going to just stand there in front of everyone and not know the difference between a Grindylow and a boggart. What, in the name of Elmer's pointy hat, is a boggart? Milo asked. A household pest that takes the form of whatever its viewer fears, she said shakily. You have shape-shifting fear monsters as house pests here, Milo asked, impressed. Cool. Morty, sitting on his shoulder, nodded vigorously. We aren't supposed to learn about them until 3rd year, but maybe Professor Quirrell will be able to get the jump on us like Snape did with Harry, so I thought I should be prepared and read a little ahead. But what if it wasn't enough? And I wind up sitting there like Harry did until his trigger-happy lunatic assaults the Slytherins again? She nodded to Milo. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be insufferable. She was looking really distraught. Hermione, it's all right. Ron's just upset because you were right about not splitting up, and it made him look a bit daft, Harry said gently. He looked at Ron. I'm sorry, but it did. He turned back to Hermione. He's embarrassed, that's all. What, me, mate? Embarrassed? Asked Ron defensively. Nah, it's only that this bookworm keeps just leaping at the chance to show how much better she is than us. Really, she should have been in Ravenclaw. Then her own kind would have had to put up with her. Hermione fled the common room, sobbing. Hannah shot him a look that could petrify a Medusa with PC class levels, and then chased after her. What? He asked. Harry shrugged. I think she's been hit by a crushing despair spell, Milo said. Maybe I should go after, see if I can... No, Pavarti-Petil said. See if I can dispel her, he finished. Then she'd be fine. Don't even dream about it. Hannah will handle it. You stay here. Magic, Pavarti said, is not the problem. Ron, a word? She asked, sounding deceptively sweet. Yeah, in a mo. Only me and Harry were about to play a game of Wizard's Chess, he said. No, Ron. Now, the girl insisted. I finally had a response from my contacts at the Ministry, Dumbledore said to the assembled head of houses. Albus, it's been nearly a week. Surely they could have responded earlier, Minerva McGonagall criticized, sitting down across the desk from him. She wondered how he could even think in this office with all its whirring and clicking silver contraptions, when, and hopefully it would be a long time from today, but when she became headmistress, she would have them carefully and respectively placed in a closet somewhere. A clean one, of course, but on the other side of the castle. Unfortunately, not even Merlin himself could devise a spell capable of cutting through red tape, Dumbledore sighed. The short answer is that there have been no reported attacks on any wealthy wizard's residence recently, and no detections of underage magic from the vicinity around Hogsmeade. I knew it, Snape sneered. The boy spun us a web of lies. No mere child could escape Death Eaters. I really had thought better of him, McGonagall sighed. Well, I suppose he is only a boy. Any word on the broomstick, Phileas? Well, as we all know, reported thefts are kept quite confidential down at the DMLE, Phileas said. McGonagall sighed. She'd hoped that they could make headway there. But I have a friend from my dueling days down at the Department of Ministries, and he used to share an office with someone in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, and he says that while no official reports have been filed, his old flame down in the organ that handles broomstick registry claims that Warden McNair, who works as executioner for the Ministry, but he's an ex-Death Eater, recently bought a Nimbus 2000, Flitwick said proudly, then paused to catch his breath. Which tells us what exactly these broomsticks are, I believe, extremely popular. Oh, that was Snape. Oh well, Snape said. They're also extremely expensive, and McNair already owned one, Flitwick said with aplomb. Hardly evidence a man can have 2 broomsticks, Snape said. To Dumbledore, however, he gave a quick, discreet nod. Dumbledore sighed. I have other information, and I dare not say from where or who, that suggests the Death Eaters are up to their old game again. Professor Sprout gasped. Surely not, Headmaster. Not with their leader dead and their numbers reduced, she asked, her voice gripped with fear. I am afraid so, Pomona. We should contact the Aurors at once, McGonagall exclaimed. Without any proof, Lucius would have any who acted sacked, Snape sneered, slouched across his chair. I'm afraid, Severus, that you are correct, Dumbledore said. We shall just have to be extra vigilant. And what of the boy? Flitwick asked. He shall continue his education here at Hogwarts until he learns to control his magic. Accidents like what happened in Severus's potion class cannot be allowed to happen out where Muggles might see. And until we are certain McNair and his comrades have forgotten that young Milo stole the broomstick, Dumbledore said again, he appears to be an exceptionally confused and troubled young orphan, but his heart is true. Quirius spoke very highly of him this evening, and how he attempted to help rescue, unsuccessfully unfortunately, a number of lost Gryffindors. Snape smiled briefly. He was particularly proud of that punishment. Which brings me to another matter, Dumbledore continued gravely. Hagrid has been finding something most concerning in the Forbidden Forest. The heads of houses listened carefully, intrigued. He's found signs, blood, some hair, that something has been attacking the unicorns who live there. Sprout gasped. McGonagall looked stunned. Flitwick shook his head sadly, and even Snape looked disgusted. Attacking a unicorn was low, even by his standards. Hagrid has been unable to find whatever has been causing the attacks, but Quirrell has volunteered, as defense professor, to take over the investigation. He said that it was likely the work of some fell creature, or possibly even a powerful dark wizard. If the collective amount of surprise felt by the assembled professors was expressed in terms of, say, water, using the baseline of one fair-sized pink plastic plastic beach bucket full of seawater, representing the surprise felt when a politician suggests something sensible in Parliament, and a bathtub full of water, representing the theoretical surprise not felt when the idea doesn't get ridiculed by the opposing party. Then their entire surprise, when they heard of the unicorn attacks, could be collected in a 2-liter bottle of Diet Coke, once said Diet Coke had been safely disposed of alongside other toxic chemicals. While their current surprise, caused by hearing that Quirrell had volunteered for something dangerous, was almost, but not quite, the size of the Mediterranean Sea. Well now, McGonagall mused, it seems we've quite underestimated the defense professor. Indeed, it appears that in crisis he can really pull himself together, Phileas said. I'm really proud of him, actually. He also pointed out that this is an excellent opportunity for detention, Dumbledore said. Between him and Hagrid, any students with them will be quite safe, but absolutely petrified. You're not suggesting we deliberately send children into the Forbidden Forest? It got its name for a reason, Albus, to hunt something vile enough to attack a unicorn. I, for one, rather like the idea, Snape said. Should make that boy think twice about attacking my students. Thank you. I quite like this hat. I heard there's werewolves in the Forbidden Forest, Ron said when they heard the news. McGonagall had come to inform them that Quirrell had offered an alternative detention for Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Milo, and that while it was particularly awful, if they went with a statue cleaning punishment for all Gryffindors would be reduced. It's not a full moon, Ron, Hermione sighed. What, werewolves are real? Harry asked. Obviously, everyone knows that, said Ron. They're as real as dragons and goblins. Dragons are real? No, never mind. If we do this, it counts against how many statues we have to clean. And after the last time, I think we want to avoid that, Harry said. I'm in. Same. The experience alone will be well worth it, Milo said. And I can probably handle anything they throw at me. You're insane, mate, Ron said. I'd sooner clean another 1,000 statues that set foot in that forest. I'm with Ron, Hermione said. Cleaning isn't so bad, and that sounds really dangerous. We'll be fine, Milo said. Quirrell will be with us, and I, for one, like the cut of his jib. And Hagrid will be there, Harry said. What's the worst that could happen? Ah, yes, famous last words. And that's the end of Chapter 4, ladies and gentlemen. We were able to read 2 chapters tonight, so I'm pretty proud of that. Thank you all for hanging out with me this evening and enjoying this story. I'm looking forward to never ask what's the worst that could happen, because there's always something worse that can happen. Always. Trust me, as someone who suffers from panic attacks and anxiety disorders, there's always something worse that can happen. And I'm really good at inventing them. Anyway, so thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. I really appreciate it. I also Twitch on Mondays, and I Twitch on Thursdays for my Itty Bitty Kitty Committee, which is over on Balsamic Games. We also are on YouTube, and I now have affiliate status. So if you could subscribe, if you want to subscribe, you could do so, and that would be greatly appreciated. I'm very happy about being an affiliate now, and thank you all so much for the follows and everything. That really does help us out so much. Thank you also to our patrons, because you guys help make all of this crazy stuff possible. And if you would like to become a patron or otherwise support us by perhaps purchasing us a jittery beverage, you can do that. Those links are on the About page on my Twitch as well as my YouTube. Thank you all so much again, and remember to stay safe. So keep your eyes peeled, your ears open, and your wands ready.